Hello, have you read this novel? You have? Well done, you nerd. But if you haven't read it, where have you been in the last 18 months? Don't worry, the movie's out this month, and I want to give you 10 good reasons why you should watch the movie. Now, the movie is not a masterpiece. It has many faults, and I'll be discussing that later on. But at the same time, the number one reason why you should watch this movie is because of this novel. To me, this is the greatest debut novel of the 21st century. Angie Thomas has done something that most other novelists struggle to do, which is to capture the audience, capture the attention of a really demanding demographic, the 12 to 18-year-olds. As a young adult novel, it has been a huge success. It has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 84 weeks. And all over the world, it has amazed readers everywhere. And I'm a member of a book club in London. And when we discussed this last year, every single person in that group loved it. There were about 20 of us. Everybody is a white British reader except me. And this novel really touched and moved everyone. I met people from the state of Arizona in the United States. Some of them openly support the Republican Party and Trump, and they loved it. And I met people from the state of Iowa, again, loved this novel. This is a story about a 16-year-old African-American girl who sees her best friend get shot dead by a white police officer. And the story follows the aftermath of that incident. The title, The Hate You Give, comes from an acronym by Tupac, Thug Life, which goes, the hate you give little infants F's everyone. And in many ways, love and hate, these are all universal emotions that we can all feel. The great thing about this story is that it is in many ways a demonstration of that great speech by Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, where he goes, if you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And throughout the whole novel, the controlling idea of the hate you give little infants F's everyone, just runs through and controls the whole story. As a debut novel, I think it's really important. My channel is for those of you who are apprentice novelists, screenwriters, and playwrights. And I think the best strategy is to study the debut novels that has become huge in the last 3 years. Why? Because success leaves clues, says Tony Robbins. And when we study a novel like this or the movie, we realize why this has succeeded, why so many others have failed. The key reason for me is not just to do with the great voice of the novel or the great character of Star, but it's also to do with strong emotions. Great stories are all about strong emotions. You can have great prose, great dialogue, but ultimately it has to move or make people laugh. And this novel did that, and this movie did that. When I left the cinema, I was in tears. I was embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to see that. And I'm sure so many others in the audience must have been moved as well. And this is such a powerful story. This is one of the reasons why you must watch it. Now, in the history of African American literature, we have seen so many great novelists coming up in the last 100 years, from Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, Toni Morrison, Walter Mosley, and Alice Walker, and many others. Many others have done great things about the subject of race relations. But why has she succeeded? Because it's to do with strong emotions. That means that it didn't just appeal to those 12 to 18-year-olds. It has appealed to so many different groups, so many different demographics. This is why the movie itself is going to be a huge success, because of that. It is about strong emotions, right? This is why you must watch this movie. The second reason why you should watch this movie is because of Amandla Stenberg, the actress who plays Star. She is amazing. I think this is the most charismatic performance that I ever seen by a young actress since Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone. Every time Amandla Stenberg is on screen, she just completely enchants me. She can move me to tears. She made me laugh. And she is the definition of on-screen charisma. And Denzel Washington has talked about a few years ago about how there aren't many African-American actresses who are huge superstars. Now, when it comes to the men, there's Will Smith and there's Denzel Washington, who can bring in huge box office receipts. But when you come to the actresses, now, right now, there are so many great African-American actresses. Octavia Spencer, Viola Davis, Taraji P. Henson, Kerry Washington, and many others. But none of them are huge superstars like Jennifer Lawrence or Scarlett Johansson. And this is something that Denzel Washington talked about. We don't have many huge superstars who can be global, huge. When they tried to cast Ghost in the Shell last year for the reboot, the remake, there should have been an Asian actress in the lead. They couldn't find one who's a superstar. So instead, they had to pick Scarlett Johansson, and that stirred up a lot of controversy. But in this one, in Amandla Stenberg, we finally got an actress, only 20 years old, who's going to be huge. I think she's going to be amazing. And the other reason that I love her is that there's this argument that has come up because of this movie to do with colorism. The fact that she is light-skinned. In real life, Amandla Stenberg's father is white. Her mother is African-American. So we have a mixed-race actress. And in the novel, the star that I visualized was a dark-skinned African-American girl. But in the movie, we have Amandla Stenberg. I didn't have a big issue with that, but there are many African-Americans who thought that this is wrong. Because this goes back to this issue called pigmentocracy. If you've read enough novels by Toni Morrison's like the novel Tar Baby or Beloved, you'll realize that in the time of slavery, any black woman or man who was light-skinned, they would have had an easier life, whereas someone who was dark-skinned would have had a harsher life by the slave masters. And even now, some people would argue that light-skinned African-American actresses are having an easier time, whereas the dark-skinned African-American actresses and singers have a really tough life. So this has become a real controversy right now. But for me, as soon as Amandla Stenberg was on screen, I was completely charmed. It works. The story works because she's amazing in it. And I think she's going to be a huge superstar. In the next few months, we're going to see we're going to hear the phrase, "A star is born," because of Lady Gaga, and that's a good film. And I'm sure in the award season, that's going to begin with the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, and Screen Actors Guild and the Oscars. Lady Gaga and Amandla Stenberg are surely going to compete in the same category for Best Actress. But I really do think that Amandla Stenberg has the edge because she is so versatile here. And she completely owns this film. Without her, this film would have failed. So go and watch this movie because this is history in the making. We're going to see a superstar being born in this film. So Amandla Stenberg, the second big reason why you should watch The Hate You Give. The third reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is to do with this great ensemble cast. I can't remember the last time where I saw so many actors and actresses give great performances all across a movie that's over 2 hours long. We have Algie Smith playing Khalil. Even though he's not in the film for too long, that's not a spoiler. He's amazing. He's so charismatic and he's funny and he's so cool in that movie. And then we have Issa Rae, the former YouTuber who plays Star's lawyer. Again, really effective. And then we have Russell Hornsby, a really important role. He plays Star's father, Maverick, a powerhouse performance throughout the whole movie. And then we have Common, the rapper Common, who plays Uncle Carlos. Again, some of the key scenes involve him. And then we have Regina Hall. But the memorable performance comes from Sabrina Carpenter, who plays Haley. We are supposed to hate this blonde white girl because of the things she says. And Sabrina Carpenter brings that in. Sabrina Carpenter is brilliant at inciting those emotions of hate in the audience. And then we have another amazing, memorable performance from KJ Apa. KJ Apa from Riverdale plays Chris, the white American boyfriend, who does, who also has some really important lines in the movie. And we're going to remember this film for so many breakout performances. This is a movie that's going to send a lot of these actors and actresses into the next stage of their career, especially KJ Apa, who's from New Zealand, but I completely believed him as Chris. So well done, New Zealand. The last time I remember New Zealand producing an actor who went on to become globally famous was Russell Crowe. But I don't think KJ Apa is going to be a hellraiser like Russell Crowe. Let's hope not. But this is the other reason. Great ensemble cast. The fourth reason why you should go and watch this movie is because of the screenwriting. My channel is for apprentice screenwriters, novelists, and playwrights. And I think sometimes it's good to study something that's badly written. To me, the screenwriting in the HUK is one of the worst I ever seen. I have to be in some ways careful about this because Audrey Wells, who wrote the screenplay, died a day before the world premiere. There are some strengths in this screenplay. She has been faithful to the source material, but there are three huge negatives which spoils the movie for me. And I think if you're an apprentice screenwriter, you should study this screenplay. When the PDF of this movie comes out in a few months' time, get it, read the novel, watch the movie, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The first major problem is to do with on-the-nose dialogue. Throughout the movie, there are so many instances where there are lines of dialogue that made me cringe. These are things that would have been taught to an 18-year-old at a film school. But Audrey Wells, who's supposed to be a veteran, who's famous for her breakthrough screenplay for The Truth About Cats and Dogs, and she's done many others as well. But here, it's just truly awful. The other big weakness is to do with backstory. The way she handles backstory, sometimes characters sit there and they talk about their past. It's as if they are regurgitating the notes of a character. And that, again, was really cringeworthy. But the really worst part of it is the excessive use of voiceover narration. Right? I think that voiceover narration is the signifier of a talentless screenwriter. If somebody has if somebody has genuine talent for screenwriting, he or she will realize that the cinema is a visual medium. It's obvious, right? The goal is to show, don't tell. You should only be using voiceover narration as the last resort. David Mamet, one of the great masters of dialogue, once said that the greatest screenplay in the world for a feature film will have virtually no dialogue. And even with voiceover narration, you should only use it if you're really desperate and you couldn't find any solutions. Audrey Wells should have found a lot of strategies to demonstrate what she wanted to say, but there isn't. When the movie first started, we hear the voiceover narration. I thought that's okay to start and end with voiceover narration. A lot of good films do that. But the problem was, throughout the whole movie, that voiceover narration comes on and on and on. Now, in some ways, we can forgive that because all good young adult novels are about having one voice or maybe two voices. And they're told in the first person. So what Audrey Wells has done is taken that great voice of Star, but she's done it too much all throughout the movie. Now, going to a movie is expensive, right? Because I'm sure you have the same issue. You have to, traveling to the cinema, whether it's by car, bus or train, costs money. And cinema tickets are expensive in England, USA, Australia, everywhere. Cinema going is an expensive pastime, right? So when I go into the cinema, I want to watch a great movie. If I want to listen to an audiobook, I would stay at home. So when I watched the movie, I felt as though I was listening to an audiobook. I didn't want to listen to an audiobook. This is a huge problem. This is a massive problem. And I think it's worth comparing the screenplay of the HUK with The Fault in Our Stars, which is a far superior movie, which is a far superior adaptation. Now, in that one, the strength of that novel and the screenplay relies on Hazel's voice. But in the movie, we don't get that much voiceover narration. And the voiceover narration is used so effectively. And as a result, the film succeeds. And it is cinematic. This one isn't. And so if you study this, do look at it. Now, having said all this might still get nominations for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Golden Globes, at the Oscars, and at the Writers Guild of America. Because the main reason is that a lot of the time in these award shows, the best screenplay doesn't always win. They bring in all sorts of other factors. So the fact that Audrey Wells has died means she could get an Oscar, a BAFTA, and a WGA. A few years ago, one of the co-writers of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, based on that great John le Carré novel, he died, and the co-screenwriter won a BAFTA. And he also got Oscar nominations. I really do think that will happen again this year or in 2019 with the Oscars. And also, this is a worthy film, right? The story is powerful. And most people who vote in the Academy, vote in the Oscars and the BAFTAs, I don't think they're going to read 5 books plus the 5 adapted screenplays, watch the movie, and then cast the vote. They're not going to do that. William Goldman has written extensively about how the Academy voters don't really behave with integrity. They just vote. Sometimes they even give it to their gardeners or their PAs or their husbands or wives to fill that form. So we're not going to get an accurate voting anyway. So because of all those reasons, Audrey Wells could win Best Adapted Screenplay in the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, and the Oscars, but don't read too much into it because it really is full of faults. And, study great screenplays, but study this one because this is a masterclass in some of the worst things you must never do. The 5th reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is because of the directing. Now, this is directed by George Tillman Jr. He's directed films like Barbershop and Men of Honor and many others. But here, I think this is his worst movie to date. Yet, he might still go on to get nominations for Best Director at BAFTA and Oscars and the Golden Globes. And there are so many places where I really cringe because what this movie needed was an auteur director, someone like Spike Lee. But instead, we got George Tillman Jr., who's the big positive that I can say is that as soon as the novel became a huge bestseller last year, 20th Century Fox bought the rights, and they probably wanted to get the movie into the theaters as soon as possible. So one of the best people to get it is someone who's a good journeyman director who can just do it, hack it away. And this is what has happened. Now, George Tillman Jr. has said in some interviews that he wanted to make a movie for the young adult readership, the core audience. So in some ways, he has succeeded. But then again, that's patronizing the 12 to 18-year-olds who watch Riverdale or Pretty Little Liars. But the thing is, I'm sure there are many 12 to 18-year-olds who are cinephiles who can tell that this movie looks like a TV movie. For me, it looked like a bad MTV series. And the lighting is awful, the cinematography is awful. So many places, it looks like a student film. Somebody made a student film in the final year in their film school. And I've seen YouTube videos by great YouTubers on a low budget that are more cinematic than The Hate You Give. There are so many scenes that made me cringe so much. And this is 2 hours long with this feeble directing. And then when I go to the cinema, I want to be completely lost in that experience, right? Don't forget, I'm paying a lot of money. So when I'm watching, I want pure cinema, right? So when I watch a movie by Scorsese or Tarantino, David Fincher, James Cameron, Kathryn, Bigelow, any of those great directors, Ang Lee, I'm watching pure cinema. When I was watching this one, I was getting so irritated and I kept thinking about what would David Fincher have done with this? Fincher is a genius, an obsessive. There's no way he would have allowed, for example, the excessive voiceover narration. I kept thinking about Scorsese, Tom Hooper, Christopher Nolan, and more importantly, Kathryn Bigelow. She made Detroit, right? Her last film. That film is a masterpiece. That film also looks at race relations, and I just love that. We needed someone like that to do this novel justice, but George Tillman Jr. is not it. And there are so many amazing flaws. When I was reading this novel, I have read this novel twice now, and every time I was reading it, I was thinking about the screenplay I would write or the movie I would direct. And in my vision is something that combined Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing with bits of Antoine Fuqua's Training Day and lots of a great episode of The Wire. That would have been my vision, a truly gritty, realistic version, which is what this should have been. But instead, we get an MTV version, a cheap MTV version. There are some places, it's truly awful. Now, if you love cinema and you go and watch this movie and think this is a great director, you are probably saying it because you're a white person and you don't want other people to think you're a racist. So I have seen a lot of white critics and reviewers, both professional and amateurs, say that this is a brilliantly directed movie because they don't want to be seen as racist. But the thing is, you have to be objective. If you want to learn the art of screenwriting or directing, you've got to look at this unemotionally. It is awful. It's a masterclass of awful directing. Having said that, this George Tillman Jr. could still get lots of nominations at the usual places, the Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, the Oscars, the Directors Guild America, DGA. He could even win an Oscar for Best Director. Why? Because one, it is a worthy film. Two, it has a great story. Even though it's even though the directing is inferior, the story is important, it's powerful, it has great performances. But more importantly, it's to do with, again, something that William Goldman has said. At the Oscars, most people don't really vote properly. And because of this, he could get it. I mean, there's a great passage here where in this book where there are lots of great articles about the Oscars. William Goldman, one of the greatest screenplays of all time, is also a great student and an observer of the Oscars, of the Academy. And this is what he has to say. Is the voting honest and is it serious? Yes and yes. In the old days of true studio power, you voted for whom you were told, or the studio picked up your ballot and marked it for you. No longer. Most of the people I know vote their conscience, always with the caveat that if a friend, or more usually an enemy is there, get him. Now, because of this, there could be so many other great directors with nominations this year, but George Tillman Jr. might win or get a lot of Oscar nominations. So be careful when you're watching this movie. This is a really poorly directed movie, but the film redeems itself because of three reasons. Firstly, it has an amazing, strong core fan base. They will go and it will bring the money back. Secondly, the second big reason is that the great performances. No matter what you say about the screenwriting or directing, too many great performances mean, and the great emotions mean we're going to be won over. And the other important reason is that even if people who don't watch it, the ones who go and vote, as I said before, it is a worthy film. One of the memorable Oscars is when 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture. And Ellen, who hosted that ceremony, said right at the end, 12 Years a Slave had to win Best Picture because if it hadn't, everybody would have thought we're racist, right? So something similar could happen here. This is a poor film. This is not pure cinema. The screenwriting is awful, but it might still get a lot of technical awards like Best Directing and Best Screenwriting. It shouldn't do, but it can. But still study it because this is what shouldn't be happening. But the Academy is, as William Goldman says in this book, it is very rare for a great film to get a lot of Oscars. It's the same with the BAFTAs. So, but still go and watch it because you see, this is a masterclass in how not to direct a great movie. The sixth reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is because of Harry Potter. Now, let me ask you, have you read these novels? If you read them, you're going to enjoy this movie a lot. Maybe you haven't read it, but you've been too lazy to read, but maybe you watched a lot of those films. Again, this film is full of reference to this world. And it's fun. Khalil makes lots of reference to it. And then Star's father, Maverick, again, has a different way of looking at the Harry Potter world. I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is fun. Because it is amazing the impact that J.K. Rowling has made on the world. But through Maverick and Khalil, we see the way it has impacted the African American communities. And that's really interesting and revealing. And this, again, Angie Thomas obviously loves J.K. Rowling. And my play, Taylor Swift's Dog, which won a major prize earlier this year, and it went on a tour of England in this summer, that play is all about three different generations of women who were heavily influenced by J.K. Rowling. Now, Angie Thomas, born in 1988, would have been definitely one of those girls who would have loved Harry Potter. And she said that in many interviews. And throughout this novel and the film, we see lots of wonderful references to it. So if you love it, if you love this world, you're going to get something extra. It's also, Angie Thomas also has J.K. Rowling's passion for great storytelling. I always think that to be a successful writer, to be successful in this business, you shouldn't be a good writer, you should be a great storyteller. Storytelling is the hardest thing to do, and Angie Thomas can do it, and she's a great disciple and the great inheritor of J.K. Rowling. So you're going to get a lot out of it if you're into this. So this is the sixth reason why you must watch The Hate You Give. The seventh reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is because of the music. The soundtrack is amazing. Of course, Tupac dominates the whole story, but there are other great contributions from Kendrick Lamar, Logic, and Portishead, and also right at the end we have this beautiful song by Alyssa called We Won't Move. That will move you to tears. So the soundtrack alone it makes the film worthwhile. The eighth reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is because of the way it deals with a really important social issue. I don't usually like reading issues-led novel, or I don't usually like watching issues-led movies either, but this is different. This is about the Black Lives Matter movement, and most people might not know about this. Now, there are many African Americans who have said that every white person should watch this movie. Now, regardless of what I said about the many deficiencies of this movie, I do think everyone should watch it because it is an important story. Chuck D of Public Enemy over 25 years ago said that rap music is Black America's CNN. But now, in some ways, great rap music from people like Kendrick Lamar continues to be Black America's CNN. But in this case, a movie like that, even a poor movie like The Hate You Give, is bringing news to a lot of people all over the world. Because I'm not sure how any white person would really understand what it's like to be a black man or woman in the United States. I mean, we can broaden that by saying, I don't know how a white person could really understand what it feels to look like this. Now, even in England, which is a lot more tolerant and more liberal than most parts of the United States, someone like me, at least once a year, I would be out in the streets of England and some stranger would call me the N-word. The N-word. At least once a year. It happens. And if I go out with a beautiful white girl or woman, there will be at least one stranger who will shout out something at me or her or both. It happens. And we see that in The Hate You Give, the novel and the film, where the interracial relationship between Star and Chris, we see these really uncomfortable situations. Now, if you look like this, only you would know what it likes to feel when you're getting this kind of abuse, this kind of overt racism. And also there are lots of instances of covert racism as well. So this is why I think every white person should watch it, at least when it comes on DVD, because then you'll get to understand what it's like to look like this in a society where all the power resides with the white majority. So, so you should watch it. I think a lot of all those African Americans who said every white person should watch it, I have to agree with that because I relate to why they have to say it. But it is an important movie. Go and watch it. The ninth reason why you should watch this movie is because The Hate You Give forms an important part in a list of movies that tackles race relations. For example, Ryan Coogler's movie Fruitvale Station. We can go back and talk about Mississippi Burning, Cry Freedom, Kathryn Bigelow's Detroit, and most importantly, To Kill a Mockingbird. There is a long list of movies. Love Field is another good example. So if you've already seen those movies and liked it, like those, then you will find a lot to like in The Hate You Give. If you haven't seen any of those movies, then this is a good chance to, in some ways, and I say this with great sincerity, to educate yourself, to improve your levels of empathy about how people who are not similar to you live their lives. So give that a go. The 10th reason why you should watch The Hate You Give is because of the theme of love. There are two great love stories here. Now, love is a universal emotion, especially teenage love. We must have all experienced some form of it, even if it's just an unrequited love. James Cameron has said that all great stories are ultimately love stories. So if you look at his great films from Terminator 1, Aliens, Terminator 2, Titanic, and even Avatar and True Lies, they are in many ways love stories. And I have to agree with that. And this, again, the first love story is Star's love for Khalil. Her first kiss was with Khalil. And then she's in love with this white American boy, Chris. And that's a serious relationship, an interracial relationship that comes with all sorts of complexities. And the film does deal with it really well. There's a great scene with Star and Chris where they talk frankly about race. And it goes something like this. Chris says, black, white, we're all the same. I don't see color. I see people for who they are in the exact same way I see you. And Star tells him, if you don't see my blackness, you don't see me. I completely related to Star's situation there and I think anybody who's been in an interracial relationship should be able to relate to her predicament, because even in my case, I always like to be open and direct with the amazing white girls or women with whom I have relationships. Always say that, no matter who I am, ultimately my identity is defined by my ethnicity. So there will be lots of issues surround it. And Star in this one has that great line: if you don't see my blackness, you don't see me at all. And I think and the whole movie and the novel deals with interracial relationships in a really effective way. So this is another reason. Great stories are ultimately to do with love, some form, especially romantic love. So this is why I do think, I know this sounds corny and cheesy, but it is a good love story. There is a good love story in there. And so watch it for that. These are my 10 reasons why you should watch The Hate You Give. It is an important movie despite all the faults. And what I would like you to do is share this video on Facebook or Twitter. Tell other people about it. The reason why I'm asking is that if any movie that gets made is a small miracle, but a movie about race relations getting any release at all is a rarity. And this movie is not getting a wider release in the UK, USA, or any part of the world. And they're all on limited release everywhere. So it's only through word of mouth we're going to spread the word about The Hate You Give, the movie. So I really do suggest you tell everyone about it. And more importantly, if you get the chance, watch it either on DVD or maybe even go to the cinema. Because the Black Lives Matter movement is something that's worth learning about. We need to watch all those issues that are dealt with in The Hate You Give, because in the grand scheme of things, these things affect all of us. So thank you for watching, and I'll be doing more videos like this. So please consider subscribing. If you already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much for your support. And I have to leave you in the words of Tupac: the hate you give, little infants, F's everyone.